I am continuing in my reading. What I'm doing in this series is to read through the entire standard works of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. This consists of the Bible, the Book of Mormon, the Doctrine and Covenants, and the Pearl of Great Price. I am continuing reading in a chronological order, according to event, not according to publication or volume, so I'm skipping around a bit as I move along. I am continuing in my reading. Now, my last reading was section 112, and this was a section explaining the authority of the apostles and more particularly the president of the 12 apostles. Now that was back in July of 1837. My last video was a historical review or overview of what happened after we received section 112 up until the point of receiving section 113. And so that's what we're going to read today, section 113. And just before this, a couple of days before this, is when Joseph Smith arrives in Far West. Now, as he's coming, he's about 120 miles from the city when Thomas B. Marsh and others meet him as an escort to bring him into the city. He comes, there's another village he stops at first, because they don't travel 120 miles in a day, they travel about 40 miles in a day at best. And so it takes them a couple of days to actually get to Far West, and they stop in a couple of places. And a day or two after they finally arrive in Far West, Joseph Smith's brother, Samuel Smith, arrives with his family. And they're all getting situated with the saints, figuring out what's going on, getting their own land, all that stuff. And he says during these early days of Joseph Smith being in Far West, while walking out, he received section 113. Well, we received section 113. And that's what's going on. Joseph Smith has just arrived. So let us look at section 113. The heading states, Answers to certain questions on the writings of Isaiah, given by Joseph Smith the prophet, March 1838, recorded in History of the Church, Volume 3, pages 9 and 10. That's all the introduction we're given. In the History of the Church, this section is not given as a revelation. It is given as, this was my musings while we walked together out in the woods. So usually in the history, as it is recorded in the history that Joseph Smith wrote, these revelations are put in verses as they are in the Doctrine and Covenants. This one isn't. This one is given just paragraphs. So I find that interesting. But anyways, let us read section 113. Who is the stem of Jesse spoken of in the 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, and 5th verses of the 11th chapter of Isaiah? Verily, thus saith the Lord, it is Christ. What is the rod spoken of in the 1st verse of the 11th chapter of Isaiah that should come out of the stem of Jesse? Behold, thus saith the Lord, it is a servant in the hands of Christ, who is partly a descendant of Jesse as well as of Ephraim, or of the house of Joseph, on whom there is laid much power. What is the root of Jesse spoken of in the 10th verse of the 11th chapter? Behold, thus saith the Lord, it is a descendant of Jesse, as well as of Joseph, unto whom rightly belongs the priesthood and the keys of the kingdom for an ensign, and for the gathering of my people in the last days. Questions by Elias Higbee. What is meant by the command in Isaiah 52nd chapter, 1st verse, which saith, Put on thy strength, O Zion, and what people had Isaiah reference to? He had reference to those whom God should call in the last days, who should hold the power of priesthood to bring again Zion and the redemption of Israel. And to put on her strength is to put on the authority of the priesthood, which she, Zion, has a right to by lineage, also to return to that power which she had lost. What are we to understand by Zion loosing herself from the bands of her neck? 2nd verse. We are to understand that the scattered remnants are exhorted to return to the Lord from whence they have fallen, which, if they do, the promise of the Lord is that he will speak to them, or give them revelation. See the 6th, 7th, and 8th verses. The bands of her neck are the curses of God upon her, or the remnants of Israel in their scattered condition among the Gentiles. Honestly, this gives us some information about the meaning of these passages in Isaiah, but even then it's a little bit cryptic, you might say. It's not exactly straightforward, but it is largely straightforward. So the stem of Jesse is Christ. That's nice and simple. The rod is a descendant of Jesse and Ephraim, who is a servant in the hand of Christ. And then the root is also a descendant of Jesse and Joseph. meaning that the root and the rod are likely the same person. Not necessarily, but likely the same person. Now, I have heard it said that the rod actually refers to Joseph Smith himself, but Joseph Smith didn't want to make that claim because, a lot of people would have rejected it, just like they would reject Christ for him claiming to be who he was. So, likely, the stem of Jesse is clearly stated to be Christ. The rod is probably Joseph Smith as well as the root. The root might be somebody else. Maybe it was Hiram, maybe it was Joseph Smith Sr., but that's what we're talking about. We're talking about the servant of Christ being called in the last days to bring about the restoration. And that's all in the 11th chapter of Isaiah. But then Elias Higbee wants to ask questions about the 52nd chapter. And this is an interesting one. It's a little bit more straightforward. It does actually state pretty clearly what's going on here. So, putting on the strength of Zion is to have the authority of the priesthood. When we honor our covenants, when we magnify our callings, that is putting on the strength of Zion. And why are we to put on the strength of Zion? So that we can build up Zion in the last days. Now, in the second part there, the bands that are upon Israel, these are the curses of God as he scattered them among the Gentiles. That is the bands that are put on Israel. The bands are that they are not a united people anymore. And to some extent, it is that they have forgotten who they are because of this cursing of God that has scattered them. And they are being called to loose the bands, meaning if they will turn to God, if they will embrace the true gospel, then those curses that God put on Israel centuries ago will be removed. Anyways, we're going to leave this here, nice and short, and I will see you in the next one, section 114. So, see you there.